RNC rule. Well, there is an RNC rule. There's Rule 40E, and Rule 40E says that once the voting starts, you continue to vote until someone wins 1,237 delegates, period, point, end of question. That doesn't change regardless of which one of these two sets of rules that we would operate under. But my biggest single point is this. Delegates have run. They are being elected to serve on the floor of the National Convention. They have the right to choose their own rules. I see no reason why we, who have yet to be elected to that Rules Committee, some of whom have not even been elected to serve as a delegate on that convention, should try to tell them anything about what they should or shouldn't do. These are all very sophisticated delegates who are coming to Cleveland to do their jobs, and I candidly think we should let them do that. We shouldn't weigh in and tip the scales in advance. We shouldn't change the rules of the game in the middle of the game. We shouldn't risk cynicism by our candidates. And most of all, we should try to avoid the unintended consequences when you make such a dramatic change on the eve of a convention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mickelson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Enid Mickelson of Utah. I rise in opposition for the following reason. Many of you know, but some of you do not, that I had the great privilege to serve in the 104th Congress when the Republican Party took over in January of 1997 for the first time in 40 years. I had the further great privilege to be appointed to the Rules Committee by Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. I dealt with these rules. I explained them to others. I presided over the House under these rules. We conducted all of our rules meetings in accordance with these rules. And I would venture to say that perhaps, except for my friend Randy Evans, I know these rules better than anybody else in the room. Mr. Chairman, when I was put on that committee, the chairman, Jerry Solomon, gave me a beautiful leather-bound book that contained the rules of the House, commentary on rules of the House, and the United States Constitution. That book is only about 3 inches thick, and so I'm a little baffled by the number of binders that we have here representing the rules of the House, because the rules of the House, signed by Jerry Solomon, still sit on my bookshelf in a place of great honor, because they meant the world to me, and it is only about this thick. Now, if we were going to get into a point-by-point discussion on what the House rules do versus what Robert's Rules of Order do, I'd probably start with one example, but I'll only give you one. The one I'd start with is the fact that under Robert's Rules of Order, if you want to suspend a rule, let's say Rule 40B, you only require a majority under Robert's Rules of Order. Under the House rules, you need 2/3 affirmative vote to suspend the House rules. Now, figure out under which set of rules a chairman has greater power. It is not this book. Excuse me, it is this book. I got myself wound up. I apologize. Robert's Rules of Order gives a chairman far more power and discretion than the rules of the House of Representatives. Now, we could go on all day, taking it point by point. I'm not going to do that for this reason, because I agree with Randy Evans. This is not the time for us to suggest major changes or even minor changes to the rules. In 3 months, the Rules Committee of the Convention will come together. They can, if they choose, adopt all of the recommendations that we have made over the last 4 years. But they can, if they choose, completely disregard that and start from scratch. So I would suggest that our making a change of this magnitude at this point is the worst possible thing that we can do to inspire the confidence of the delegates in our home states that we are not putting our finger on the scale for any candidate. Robert's Rules of Order did not come down from Mount Sinai as Holy Writ. It is a tool. It is a tool to be used to help a minority be protected, but allow a majority to do their will. The House rules are a different tool that achieve the same thing but have been attuned and used since the day we nominated Abraham Lincoln to allow the business of this convention to go forward. Let's not change horses in the middle of the stream, as the old Western adage goes. I urge you to vote against this resolution.
Thank you. John Ryder.
Mr. Chairman, John Ryder, Tennessee. I want to make just a couple of points here. And first, remind everybody that first, the power of this committee to change the rules ceased to exist on October 1, 2014. It's Rule 12, which enabled us to reform the debate process and reform the primary calendar, gave us authority to make effective changes to the RNC rules. But that authority ended on September 30th, 2014. And since that date, we have only the power in this committee to make recommendations that are submitted to the Convention Rules Committee, and where the delegates can then, the delegate-selected members of the Convention Rules Committee will make the final decision. So we are being asked today through this proposed amendment to make a suggestion to the Convention Rules Committee, which they will consider in due course, that subjects this committee to enormous political criticism for attempting to alter the balance in the convention. That reason alone is sufficient to reject this amendment. But let me make a couple of other points, which are, first, both the Democrats and the Republicans have used the rules of the House of Representatives continuously since the mid-19th century to nominate their candidates for president. The only exception in the Republican Party since 1856, since our first convention, was in 1884 when the rules applied were Cushing's manual. With that one exception, it's been the rules of the House of Representatives. Our rules, this book, supersede the rules of the House of Representatives. And the two sets of rules have evolved in tandem, in a symbiotic relationship, so that in the experience we've gained over the past 160 years, we've adapted our rules to accommodate those problems that exist under the rules of the House of Representatives. We have a system that we actually know works. We are being offered a system that might work, might even be a superior system, but we don't know that. And it's never been tested in a national political convention in this country. And ladies and gentlemen, given the dynamics of this convention, is this the convention where you want to try out for the first time a new set of operating rules for the conduct of the convention and the nomination of the next president of the United States? I think not. I think I'm a small C conservative as well as a big C conservative. And I think this is a point where our conservative instincts as well as our principles should come into play, and we should preserve that which has served us well for 160 years. Now, there are three small points I want to make in response to what Mr. Yu said. First, he raised the issue about the vote at the 2012 convention on the report of the Rules Committee and the conduct of that vote by a voice vote. If you attended the meeting of the Committee on Arrangements yesterday, you saw the demonstration of an electronic voting technique, which Rule 37D of our rules permits to be used for everything except the nominating process itself. And with that electronic voting system, which would post the tallies on the board, We would avoid the problem of having people in the convention hall, in the galleries, who are casting voice votes on a measure to which they are not entitled to vote. And it would make it clear, the chairman could clearly announce the results of the vote, and it would be transparent, and I think it would avoid some of the problems we experienced. Second, as Ms. Mickelson pointed out, under the rules of the House of Representatives, as applied with our rules, the chair of the convention cannot unilaterally open the floor to nominations. This is a myth that seems to be circulating in the blogosphere, and it's wrong. Our Rule 40 has a nominating process which must be followed. Nominations are not permitted outside of our Rule 40, which takes precedence over the House rules or over Roberts, for that matter. The only way that could be changed would be to suspend the rules. Rule 32 of our rules provides that the rules can be suspended on the motion of any delegation at any time, provided that it receives a second from 7 states. Then you go to the rules of the House of Representatives, and Rule 15(1)A provides that it takes 2/3 to vote to suspend the rules of the House. So there is not the possibility of opening up nominations without a suspension of the rules. And, Mr. Chairman, I've laid out the process for suspending the rules. For all of those reasons and a myriad of others that we could go into, I would urge you to reject the proposed amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Helen Van Etten.
Helen Van Etten, National Committee woman from Kansas. In light of listening to all those compelling explanation of the rules, House rules versus Robert's rules, I feel like that everybody would have the best intention, and I would like to move to refer Mr. Yu's motion to a committee appointed by the chairman of the rule to be examined the proposal of the pros and cons at a later date at maybe the next rule committee meeting.
There's a motion on the floor to refer this to a committee to be appointed by the chairman that would report to the next committee meeting. One moment, please. Dr. Van Etten, could you give us the size, suggest the size of the committee that you recommend and who makes the appointment?
I will leave that to the experts. So I will not detail how many, what size of the committee. Maybe.
Yeah, it has to be in your motion.
Oh, you say 56. That's a bit. No, I just feel like this is something, we probably, this is not a good time to discuss this. So I'd like to refer this back out to the committee. Oh, 2 from each region. Okay, I got 56 and 2 from each region. I'm sorry.
All right, so
I gotta make up my mind here.
So is your motion, Dr. Van Etten, to have 2 members from each of the 4 regions
Right.
Appointed to this committee, and who would make the appointment?
The chairman of the rule committee.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor, and I believe it's been properly seconded by Solomon Yu to refer this matter to a committee, which would be chaired by myself, and the chairman would appoint 2 members of this committee from each region to discuss Mr. Yu's amendment to Rule 30. This committee would come back with their report after meeting in between now and our July meeting and make a report which this committee would then vote on for approval or disapproval. There is debate that is acceptable on a motion of this type. Is there any debate on the motion? Mr. Kent.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Kent, National Committee man from Washington State. We've come quite a ways down this pathway already. There's been a lot of debate today. There's been a lot of thought over the last week. There's been a lot of discussion over the last week. I think we're capable of continuing on and fulfilling our responsibilities and our duties here today. I heard the joke about 56 members on this particular committee, but the truth is we have 56 members on this committee, and we should be dealing with this issue today. The main reason I could give for not sending this to committee is that, as we all know, we've been accused of plotting to change the rules at the last minute. And we've been accused of trying to do that behind closed doors and so forth. As everybody knows, the doors are wide open today. You can see the cameras at the back of the room. Everybody is watching. Everybody can see what we do. I would hate for us to take action right now to send this to what would be described as a smaller committee meeting in a back room without the cameras around for the purpose of coming up with a rules change. And not only that, they would come back and make a referral to this committee much closer to the convention than today. It's already a supercharged environment and too close to the convention to be taking up a rule change anyways, and we're only going to make that worse by punting the can down the road. We see Congress do this all the time. Let's not do it ourselves. Let's not punt this down the road. Let's defeat the motion to commit to committee and continue on with our business. Thank you.
Thank you. One moment, please. Just a clarification from the parliamentarian. I think I said it before, but just in case I didn't, this committee would meet between tomorrow and when we meet again in July before the convention starts at our RNC summer meeting, and would make a report to this committee. So just so the record's complete and we have no questions about that. Mr. Yu, before I take your comments, is there anybody else who wishes to speak who hasn't yet spoken on the referral to committee? Just on that point.
Since Dr. Yee raised the question in the first place.
If you could identify yourself for the members.
I'm sorry. I'm Chris Hiskin from Nevada. I am representing Diana Orrock by proxy. Since Dr. Yee made the original motion to amend and is now willing to refer it to more detailed examination, I would support the motion to refer.
Thank you. Any other comments on the referral? We'll take Mr. Little first.
Russell Jr., Louisiana. I'm in favor of this motion. It's generated so much controversy and so much interest, and we have not been able to hear from the report of Mr. Bopp. That could be incorporated into this motion, and I believe we all know it's going to ultimately be determined by the convention, and it would be helpful for them to have the benefit of whatever analysis this committee happens to come up with.
I think we had Janet Byhofer up at the podium before. I'll take you in just a second.
Janet Byhofer, Minnesota. Based on what I'm getting from our grassroots, I would support the motion to look at this. I just think as a PR move, it would be wise to be able to come out with something. This is not going to be a bibliography of the House rules versus the Roberts rules, but something that can address the concerns that are coming up. And I think if we do that, whether or not it's even addressed at the National Convention Rules Committee, in my mind is secondary, but the ability to at least take a look at these and see what we're doing. I don't think we need to do the whole documents, but I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Dickey was up before. Mr. Dickey of Ohio.
Thank you. Jim Dickey from Ohio. I rise, Mr. Chairman, to admit that I'm a bit confused where I went to Barnes & Noble to try to get a copy of Robert's Rules of Order and found out that there are 8 current versions of Robert's Rules of Order that are newly revised versions by various people. The one that we've actually circulated here today, the 11th edition, is not the latest edition even of that particular version of Robert's Rules of Order. There's a 12th edition, and I would just ask that at the appropriate time that the committee clarify which version we're talking about.
Yeah, great point. And if I could, we do have a registered parliamentarian here with us, and Mr. Gage may want to speak on the particular question that you raised. Just real briefly, Mr. Gage, I think you have a microphone.
I'll shout. The 11th edition is the current edition.
And Mr. Dickey, to answer your question, if there is a referral to committee, there will be appropriate reference to the version that would be used, of course. Mr. Romano, I think you're up now.
J.R. Romano, Chairman, Connecticut.
Welcome.
I rise in opposition of the committee. I think we're here to do work. And quite frankly, it's time for us to move on past this. I know I would like to stop receiving the press calls and the conversations about the rules of the convention when ultimately we're making recommendations to a convention rules committee. And quite frankly, I'd much rather get the phone calls to talk about just how terrible Hillary Clinton is, how there's a lack of enthusiasm amongst Democrats, and how well we are doing versus what's going on with our rules. So I rise in opposition. Let's get done with it today, and I think it'll be in the best interest for all of us.
Thank you. Mr. King?
Steve King, National Committeeman in Wisconsin. I, too, rise to oppose this motion. I am convinced by the statements of Mr. Evans and Mr. Ryder that this would only further what is, to me, an obvious conclusion, and that we must remain with the House rules. We've been studying this for a long time. We've operated on these rules for 160 years. Granted, we all operate on Robert's rules at a state and local level, but the House rules grant the chairman of our convention the right to rule by majority at the convention. That's what needs to happen. We don't need to study it any further. I oppose the motion.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments for or against? Henry Barber?
Mr. Chairman, Henry Barber from Mississippi. I oppose Ms. Van Etten's proposal. I do believe that this committee can handle it, all 56 of us. And I also believe, to maybe the broader point, that we should defer to the Convention Rules Committee. I think it is their job, not our job, to change things. And whether it's the 7th inning, 8th inning, I don't know. But let them deal with it. They're the ones who are going to be empowered by the voters to make a decision on 2016. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Question's been called for. Takes a 2/3 vote, and it's non-debatable. So we'll go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of moving to a vote, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Okay, the vote is on the referral matter, and all those in favor of making a referral of Mr. Yu's amendment request for Rule 30, please signify by saying aye. All those not in favor of making the referral of this amendment to a special committee, please signify by saying nay. Nay. The nays have it. Is there any other business to come before us today?
Point of information.
I thought.
You haven't voted on the other one, but point of information.
All right, one moment. We have to go back. I thought we had disposed of the motion with the decision on the referral. We need to go back now and have either further debate on the main motion, which I'd like to limit to any of you that are currently standing here, and then go to a vote. So, Dr. Fisher, Mr. Blackwell, and Mr. Kent, what's that? If we're going to talk about the amendment for Rule 30, we'll go ahead and take that discussion. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Fisher.
Dr. Fisher from North Carolina. Point of information, it would be nice, since you gave people a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, if we could get a copy of the congressional rules so we know what we've been operating out there for 100 and some years. I don't know how that's achieved, but that would be nice.
Is that available through links and so on?
No, it's available on the U.S. House of Representatives.
Actually, could you clarify?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Fisher, the current version of the House rules is available on the U.S. House of Representatives website. It's a PDF. It's 1,500 pages long. There's also a second version that doesn't have all the commentary and precedents of the House that are used to interpret those rules that is also available that's about 50 pages long. But you can go to the U.S. House of Representatives website.
And for all the members, I'll talk with our legal staff, and in the next couple of days, as they're winding up their affairs here at the spring meeting, we'll go ahead and make that link available to everybody on the committee. Mr. Blackwell.
Morton Blackwell from Virginia. Fellow members of this committee, this is a very complex matter. And there are few, if any, people in this room who are completely conversant with both Robert's Rules of Order and the rules of the House of Representatives. I worked on the U.S. Senate staff, and I can tell you the number of people in the Senate, senators and staff included, who fully understood the rules of the United States Senate were about 10 or 12 people. It's very complex, and I think we should not make a change without considerable discussion. There are questions that need to be asked. For example, if we adopted Robert's Rules of Order, Robert's Rules provides that any delegate can stand up and make a point of order. And it also provides that that point of order must be dealt with by the chair before further business can be conducted. Do we want to have a convention where 2,500 people are all empowered to raise a point of order, one after the other? Exceptions, I think, would have to be made to the applications of Robert's Rules of Order to our national convention. It might be, as earlier speaker said, that there would be some improvement, but I think it needs to be fully discussed and to the point where those on this committee or those on the Rules Committee of the Convention have a good understanding of all of the aspects of it. And so it would be premature, I think, for us to make a recommendation right now. And we might even decide at the convention, in the Convention Rules Committee, to adopt Robert's Rules of Order, but not to have that go into effect until the convention 4 years from now. There are a lot of options that we have, but it's too complex a matter for us to discuss it here, particularly in an environment where no matter how expert someone is, we're limited to speak for 5 minutes total. So I suggest that it should not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll take Mr. Kent and then just give Mr. Yu one last comment.
Thank you, Jeff Kent, National Committee Man from Washington State. I rise to speak against the motion to change this rule, mostly for the same reason I expressed earlier, and that is we're going to get accused, no matter what we do here, of trying to rig the game, and it's just, we're going to have to deal with that over and over and over again all the way to the convention. If we take any action whatsoever to change any rule, especially this rule. Now, in the process of explaining my reason here, I have some big thank yous that I want to give first. First of all, to Solomon Yu for bringing this issue up at this meeting in open public. I think it's really good for the cameras to be focused on us right now and for them to see how respectful we are to each other and how thoughtful we are in our arguments and how much we appreciate each other when they stand up to speak. I think it's marvelous for the world to be able to see that, because sometimes we're accused of being the opposite of that. And so I really do appreciate that Solomon's brought this up so that we can show our better side in this debate. And when I say respect, I know each and every person here respects each other. And I know that I appreciate every time somebody steps up to the microphone, because I learned something every time. So again, Solomon, thank you for bringing this topic up so that we could deal with it in such a polite and professional manner in front of all of the cameras. My second thank you goes out to the chairman of our committee. You've done a tremendous job for the last 3.5, almost 4 years of leading us through the process that we are charged to do, and that is to analyze the rules and come up with a recommended package to pass on to the next convention. And you've done a yeoman's job at it. You've done marvelous work. It hasn't been easy. We haven't been easy at times. And I very much appreciate the work you've done in leading us through.
Thank you.
And the third group of people I'd like to thank is the committee itself. We really are showing our better sides today, and we've done that over and over and over again, even when the cameras weren't watching. And I really want to extend my appreciation to each and every member of this committee for the hard work that they've done. And Bruce mentioned it earlier, what a great job this committee's done. Let's not forget the things that we did accomplish. Right out of the gate, we got a package of rules from Tampa that everybody agreed was flawed. And our first task was to go about fixing those. And we did a tremendous job of doing that. We fixed the mistakes that were made in Tampa. Then the next thing that we were charged to do was to come up with a primary calendar that everybody would obey this time instead of trying to jump ahead of the line as they have in the past. And we developed a primary calendar that worked. A tremendous job done. And then we created a debates committee to do something that our RNC has never done, and that is participate in the actual organization, the undertaking of our primary debates. And that worked. And then we came up with a recommended package of changes that we are going to pass on to the next convention, and I think we've done marvelous work at that as well. But now I think that work's done, and it's time for us to step aside and let the Convention Rules Committee do its job and undertake the changes that it wants for its convention. There's 2,472 delegates being elected from every corner of every state by the grassroots of our party. We should trust them. We should yield to them. We should defer to them, and we should defeat this motion. And I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Mr. Yu, last comment on this topic.
Mr. Chairman, I have an inquiry. At one point, councils and parliamentarians said I can bring back the side-by-side comparison between Roberts and House Rule. Can I still bring back before the vote?
Could you repeat that again? We're having a little bit of a problem with the acoustics.
Bring back Mr. Bob's report side-by-side comparison between the Roberts versus House Rule. It's very important for this vote. Before the vote, I think people need to hear the difference. There is a difference. That's one. And two, I think many of the members talking about let's kick the can down the road. I remember the can being kicked down the road in 2012. Did you guys remember 2012? Several members are here also helped Ginsburg try to propose rules benefit Romney. What happened? We brought the Rules Committee. So if we're going to go down that road, I think the side-by-side comparison will be very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. I think if this matter does come up again in the future, and I guess there's a possibility it could at our spring meeting or summer meeting, perhaps that's something that yourself or Mr. Bopp in an individual capacity might want to do. But for the purposes of our time here today, it's time to vote. All those in favor of the motion, which is on the boards, and that is to substitute the Robert's Rules of Order for the U.S. House of Representatives rules, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed who wish to keep the U.S. House rules, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
The nays have it. The motion's defeated. Is there any other business to come before the committee today? Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, Pat Rogers, National Committee Man from New Mexico. I would move to adjourn.
The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. We have a motion on the floor. A second.
I second that.
A second by Mr. Kaufman. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn the meeting, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Meeting's adjourned.
Didn't get anything exciting.
They did not. They did not.
Went according to plan. Went according to plan.
It's done very well. Y'all, this is amazing. We had only about 4 years.
The House rules.
Pretty amazing.